Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment on The Weekend Show. The Naira has depreciated by about 55%. Aliko Dangote has dropped off from being number one richest billionaire in Africa. Mike Adenuga has dropped off on that list, and Rabiu of BUA has dropped off. Is this because of the global economy, or is this because of the Naira falling? What are our expectations of the economy in 2024? We've also seen high inflation rates. We've also seen unemployment. We've also had promises about our refineries working, and this hasn't happened. We've also read recently about a $3 billion loan, which would be repaid with $12 billion worth of crude oil. So it's a swap. And this is what we have read. And so this may be disputed, but these are the data that we have at the moment. How does this affect Nigeria as a country and the outlook for 2024? We'll be having that conversation in the lifestyle on the political segment. And joining me, I have Dr. Ahmed Adamu, who is a petroleum economist, joining us virtually. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Happy New Year. Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, because of your sector, let's start with the petroleum sector. The refineries were promised that Dangote's refinery will take off at the end of 2023. He got a huge support by the government, the CBN and the likes. That hasn't come into fruition. Just yesterday, I read that some more crude oil has been sent to his refinery for the first 1 million barrels which they're meant to refine. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so refining business is a gradual and a careful business. And we've been expecting the Dangote refinery to come on stream, but not yet. But I want to believe that they're making preparation to come on stream as soon as possible, because we've seen supply of crude oil into the refinery. So what they're doing, they're now storing the crude oil, and then when they start production, the production will continue to flow. So having Dangote refinery will also help the economy, especially the exchange rate. Because if you look at the import baskets of Nigeria, largely majority of the import bills come from the importation of refined petroleum. So if we can refine it locally, then we can reduce the pressure on the dollar, meaning that the dollar demand will reduce, because that more than 50% demand for Forex for the importation of refined petroleum will not be there. And you talk about exchange rate is a key determinant of the future of the economy. And whether Nigerians are going to be poor or richer, all comes down to the exchange rate, because we are import-dependent country. Any sector you see is dependent on how much you import of the ingredients or the factors of production from the side. So exchange rate is a key determinant. But the question is, will it fall or will it increase? Are we going to see dollar losing more value, or are we going to see Naira appreciating? So with Dangote refinery, what we are going to see is that we don't have to go to Belgium. We don't have to go to any foreign country to import refined petroleum. We get it from Lagos, from Dangote's refinery. But the question is, will Dangote refinery sell his refined petroleum in Naira or in dollar? Because Dangote's refineries investment, we are all in dollars. Although Nigerian government has, or through the NNPC, has 20% stake in that. So the Nigerian government can request for the conversion of its 20% stake in the Dangote refinery in form of refined petroleum supply within the country. So we're going to have that kind of domestic market obligation on the Dangote refinery to supply certain amount of liters into the country. But that will only help in the supply, but not in the pricing, because the difference between Dangote's refineries liter, the price of Dangote's liter, and then the price of the imported refined petroleum products from outside is not that significant. So when we did our analysis, we discovered that the difference will not be more than 100 naira. So importing petrol from Belgium will just be 100 naira more expensive than the one that you refine in Lagos, because refining is a global business. The only difference that you're going to have is in the cost of labor and some charges and the freight that you're no longer going to have when you are doing it locally here. So the general effect is going to be on the exchange rate because we are no longer buying it with foreign currency. But that will have effect on the exchange rate. But the problem with the exchange rate is that even if in the supply segment or in the importation is being reduced, but the attitudes, the behavior of Nigerians will not make the value of Naira appreciate as it's supposed to, because we have tendency of storing our currency or our savings in foreign currency as a store of value. So the demand for dollar in the country is largely for storage of value. People buy dollar to keep it as sort of saving, because when they keep Naira, anytime the Naira slips, it loses value. Exactly. So they rather keep their savings in dollar, and that is not adding value to the economy. And that's why the dollar is increasing in value continuously and making people poorer. Not even the poor people, even the rich are getting poorer because once the dollar becomes expensive, that will also lead to inflation and reduces the value or the purchasing power parity of the Naira-denominated income.
Okay, Professor Adamu, let me bring in Inebong Hussein, who is the head of research and policy advisory at Budget. Good morning, Inebong, and Happy New Year. Welcome back to the show. We started talking about the budget last year, and so we asked to bring you back today to give us the economic outlook for 2024. And I think you're muted, so Inebong, you may have to unmute yourself. But let's hear your economic outlook for 2024.
Yeah, my apologies, and Happy New Year to you as well, and good morning to the other guests. Well. Yeah, I don't know the parts he must have covered because I joined a bit late.
So he has covered the part about the Dangote refinery coming to life and its impact on the economy.
Oh, okay. So probably I'll just start with government spending. So of course, government spending would be a critical component that you expect would spur economic growth. And as you know, a couple of days ago, the president had signed the budget into law. We still await the details. We know that the National Assembly had increased the envelope by 1.2 trillion.
Yes.
And for us, that's a bit worrisome because a lot of the fundamentals have not changed. If you look at what the government projects as revenue at 18 trillion, we still think, considering all the factors, available, that's still a bit ambitious. If you look at oil price, even if the outlook on oil price for next year is at $80 to $90 per barrel, with some of the factors on ground, we do not think that Nigeria would benefit a lot from that price increase. As you know, production continues to remain stagnant. As oil theft still remains a bane. The investments with regards to the oil and gas sector hasn't come in a long time, and that is not changing, especially if you look at capital importation for third quarter. Month on month, it declined by about 38%. Year on year, it declined by 43%. So that signals that the needed investments, whether foreign direct investments or foreign portfolio investments, that we would need, for that, for the dollar supply to sort of stabilize that volatility is not coming in that much. And so we expect that much gains will not be made from, the relative high oil prices that the world expects this year. Also, if you look at other factors like inflation, although we had projected, I think, 23%, but as at November, we had headline inflation at 28%, food inflation at 32.8%. And you know that food, energy, those are key drivers of inflation. And if you look at some of the legacy issues around food inflation with respect to insecurity in the food belt of the country, I mean, Plateau is a very recent example. If you look at some of the challenges with transportation, with the multiplicity of taxes and all of that, these are issues that would take a bit of time to address. We don't know. We're optimistic that some of those issues will be addressed, to a large extent this year, but we do not know how quickly, that can happen to, drive down inflation. Your guest had spoken about, also the impact of FX on inflation as well. Of course, we are not producing, so we do not expect, inflows as much, with regards to FX. We also see that with regards to recent borrowings as well, the federal government is also hedging production, some of the oil products we expect to produce this year against some of the borrowings they intend to take.
Let's actually talk about that, Enebong. The fact that it is said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're getting a $3 billion loan to support NNPCM production and hedging $12 billion worth of crude products to pay for that. Does that make economic sense to collect $3 billion and hedge $12 billion? How does that help the country? Does that make any sense? Please, say it to the layman.
It didn't start now. If you take your mind back, when they were going to refurbish the Port Harcourt refinery, they did this sort of dealings, $1.5 billion with Vitol, where they hedged, future productions. I think it was 30,000 barrels per day. And till date, the government had come out to say that they had finished the mechanical, aspect of that refurbishment, but that production or the refining of the product would start by the tail end of this year. For me, I think we've not gotten value for money from those types of transactions. And those types of transactions are often very opaque. The terms are not very clear. And so I do not think that that's a very good way, to obtain, financing for somewhat deficits or very important projects that you want to embark on. It has always been my opinion that the refineries should have been sold a long time ago. The government has shown that it does not have the capacity to really manage these kinds of large-scale enterprises. So it's important that, they bring in the private sector, maintain a equity in those investments, but allow the private sector drive the running of those particular enterprises so that, Nigeria as a country can get, value for those sort of investments.
Let me bring in Professor Adamu to answer this same question. Hedging future products against current zones. Is this a global practice? And from an economic angle, the math isn't mathing, and I can say this. You're collecting $3 billion and you have to pay back 12. From an economic angle, is this a global practice and does this work? Let's hear your thoughts, Professor Adamu.
Yeah, you see, when you don't have a prioritization practice in your spending, so you're likely to spend on almost everything that comes to your table or to your thinking. So for me, in the beginning, Nigeria may not necessarily have to go and take certain facilities, certain loans that will be very expensive like this one. So you borrowing less amount and paying more. And not paying more, but losing the commodity that you have, which means you losing the exchange rates, and then that lowers your foreign reserve. So this does not make sense to me. It's not a global practice, but this shows that the credibility of Nigeria, even in borrowing money, is reducing, because when you see higher cost of borrowing on any borrower, be it a country or individual, it means that the country is not performing well. And it does not make sense when we say we have to pay in crude oil to this person or organization or bank giving us the loan. It does not make sense as a country, and I don't support that. But you see, we just Nigeria government removed the petroleum subsidy. And after the removal of subsidy, what we see is continuous borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. So what's the essence of the removal of subsidy if you cannot save money and you cannot prioritize to do the things that you can do within your capacity? So for me, we have opportunity of bringing private sector to do partnership rather than going into these expensive loans. Most of these refineries, for me, I would suggest we sell them to private sectors and manage them well. We can even bring partnership with the private sectors to do that, because loans comes with extra costs and jeopardizes the future growth. So I don't support going for loans. And this means that there is no focus for the future. We're only thinking of now, because these loans comes at the cost of the future growth.
Talking about that, yes, and I'll come back to you. Okay, let's start with you, Professor Adamu, then we'll go to Nibong. Over the last couple of days, you must have received emails from your bank saying for Forex transactions, there's now, I think, a $15 fee, there's another 10,000 Naira, and now the government has used the Stamp Duty Act to say that for every 10,000 Naira equivalent, 50 Naira will be deducted. And I may be wrong, but that's about 0.5% of whatever Forex transaction you are getting. When we say we want to attract foreign direct investment, some of us who have businesses and may work with international organizations and partners, knowing that for every transaction you get, the government is now going to get that deduction. But not just that, going back to start deductions from 2021, retrospectively. So they go back and they now do deductions between 2021 till date and continue. What are your thoughts on that? We'll hear from you, Professor Adamu, and then Inebong. I find it quite, confusing.
I think this is contrary to what the government want to achieve, because if you want to achieve economic growth of almost 4%, and now you are constraining transaction and you are putting these holders in the financial transactions, this is not incentivizing businesses. So if you want to grow the economy, we have to make transactions attractive and easy. Because the government don't have enough Forex, perhaps that's why they're now putting so much constraint and charges on the foreign transaction, so that they reduce the demand for it. So it's a strategy to reduce the demand for the foreign currency. But for me, I rather say, instead of putting so much hurdles and making it expensive, which of course Nigerians will eventually have to afford it at higher prices, which will eventually come back and affect the layman in terms of the pricing, because any business person will have to transfer that extra cost on the poor people.
Exactly.
So that will be increasing inflation. So the government is saying in the budget that the inflation is going to reduce from 28% to 21%. And now they are bringing this policy. It means that you want to reduce inflation and you're also increasing inflation by yourself. So how is that going to be possible? So this is not consistent. So I don't know what's the idea behind this extra cost of transaction in foreign currency, but it's going to fuel inflation.
Let's hear from Inebong. What are your thoughts around this?
So I think it's counterproductive. I mean, in one breath, our government is saying that there are a lot of transactions happening outside, outside the system, and he wants to encourage, a lot of these transactions to happen, within, its purview, and then at the same time you're increasing transaction costs. I think this is going to discourage individuals, businesses from using the formal channels to trade, forex or carry on with their transactions. That's why I think it's counterproductive. There's already that skepticism as regards, how government goes about, whether it's capital controls or financial controls or some of these restrictive measures. And so that's why you see that even with the Naira, a lot of people, around certain periods during the year tend to keep the Naira because they don't know exactly what's going to happen with one policy. And so if you are coming with this sort of policy, it's going to affect, how people, trade, transact within the formal channels. People would prefer to, trade, outside the formal channels where the transaction costs are next to zero. So if you look at it more broadly, I don't think that the government will gain much, from these additional transaction costs. There's going to be a lot of trusts, deficits that would accrue as a result of this new policy. And people would generally, just decide not to, operate within the formal channel. So I don't think that would help government achieve its intended aim of, additional, forex supply or revenue, as the case may be, if it goes down this lane.
Okay, so let's talk about the energy sector, electricity now. Every year, there's a proposed hike in electricity tariffs. We've just read a report recently from the presidency saying that electricity prices are still undervalued, the discos can't really fund themselves, and they need inflow of cash. We have this privatization conversations. But to the average Nigerian, your electricity tariff is going higher and higher and higher. What's your take on that, Enebong? We'll start with you and then Professor Adamu.
I mean, there's been this clamor for cost-reflective tariffs, for the longest. We had it together with the subsidy with petroleum and then FX subsidy. Those were three subsidies that were crippling, the Nigerian economy and really shrinking our fiscal space. We had removed, petroleum subsidy, which now is debatable whether there's some form of measure that government is using to maintain prices. But that's on one hand. We also removed the FX subsidy and, allowed everybody to trade, in one window, the I&E window. I think we should wait to allow the effects, of both very, 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 very huge policy decisions to abate. The effects with regards to inflation, with regards to poverty, of course, that with the twin effects or with the effects of those twin policy decisions, there's been, you've had more people, go into poverty because the disposable income of people have reduced. You've had an increase in inflation. So I think we should wait a bit, to have some form of recovery before we now implement, this third leg, of this subsidy removal, as the case may be. If we go with this at this time, where poverty is rife, where there's a lot of hardship, I don't think that we would be able to survive the kickback, because of course, by the time you implement the cost-reflective tariff, you expect the cost of electricity to go back, to increase. This would have an impact, of course, on food prices, commodity prices. It will have an impact on prices of everything generally. And I'm not sure that we are really ready to contain, what might come out of this. So I think it's something that at this time we should wait a bit and allow things settle before we take on this third leg of that important policy reform. Because, I mean, in the medium term, it's important that, that subsidy is also sort of taken care of so that we can now focus subsidies on the productive side of the economy.
Okay, Professor Adamu, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you see, you have to look at the value chain. Electricity, largely in Nigeria, comes from the thermal stations that use natural gas. And natural gas is priced in dollars. And now with the PIA, there's a willing buyer, willing seller pricing regime, which makes the gas more of a competitive market. So with these two effects, liberalizing the gas market and the gas being sold in dollars, so all those producers, they buy the gas in dollars. And so when the dollar is expensive, so you expect that business to be more expensive. So the market is going to be more expensive. So that's why the burden on the government to continue subsidizing the electricity will not be sustainable and is going to keep increasing. So what we have now, electricity is far being subsidized, because if we are going to go by the cost-effective tariff, everyone will have been paying more than what they're paying. Now, we talk about inflation, talk about the exchange rate, and the cost of doing businesses in Nigeria is also becoming steeper. So that's why you see in every year we sit down and look at this tariff and see what are small changes before we look at the 5-year big change. So, but the government is also afraid of implementing the market reflective tariff, because you remove petroleum subsidy, you devalue the currency, and now you're increasing the tariff. The government cannot afford that. So that's why they are managing that. But what we are seeing is that people are not willing to invest in the electricity production segment because of this constraint. But if we see people migrate, when we see the energy sector migrating from this one buyer system to a more open system where producers can sell to consumers directly based on a price, I think that will help. So we should immediately open the market. So this is a situation where the bulk purchaser will be less important, and we can bypass that middle buyer, and then producers, the GenCos, can sell directly to consumers and to this cost. So this will be open based on the market rather than being constrained by a middle buyer.
Thank you very much, Professor Adamu. Enebong, my last question for you, and this is merging 3 ministries in one, so you have to do some magic here. Blue economy, solid minerals, and steel. These are 3 ministries where we have the resources, the natural resources, and it could help the economy. What's the economic outlook for marine, the blue economy, which is maritime and marine, steel, and solid minerals? We now have those broken down. What's the outlook for that in this year?
So I'll start with solid minerals. If you look at the revenue projections from the medium-term expenditure framework, it doesn't suggest that the government thinks it can, really ramp up revenues from that particular sector. That sector is one that has not given Nigeria more than 7 billion naira a year. And if you look at how well Nigeria is blessed in commercial quantity of several solid minerals across the length and breadth of the Federation, you would know that that's next to nothing, less than 1% of what accrues to the Federation revenue pool. And so it's worrisome that, the federal government is not saying that in the medium term, with all the policy reforms that it expects to carry out within that period, that it would be able to ramp up revenue in that time to something that is more consistent with the resources we have in that regard. And if you even look at what the government plans to spend in that sector, we did the analysis, compared it to what the federal government had planned to spend in either renovating or building new residences for both the president and the vice president. Cumulatively, it was about 38 billion naira. And the cumulative capex for both the Ministry of Solid Minerals and Steel was less than what we had planned to spend on the residences of the number one and number two persons of the Federation. That also signals the kind of priority that government places on both sectors and how it sees those sectors as drivers of economic growth. If you come to the solid mineral sector, I mean, not much. I mean, it's new. A lot of the policy direction we see with regards to that ministry are things we're just testing out. So I'll be very careful to make any definitive statement. I think I'll wait to see, the budget of that particular ministry and see exactly where they intend to, push their investments, to see if we're really serious, about making that particular sector a very critical component or driver of growth and, of revenue generation for our economy. I think I'd like to leave it at that.
What of the blue economy?
Yeah, it's the blue economy I just spoke to.
Yeah. So final words from you, and then Professor Adamu, what should Nigerians prepare for this year economically? Should we save more? Should we spend more? Should we invest? And this is for the people now, not government. I'll start with you, Nibong, and then Professor Adamu. Final words, 1 minute each.
So not to be a messenger of bad news, but I think Nigerians should prepare for hard times. Things are going to get worse before, hopefully, they get better. So Nigerians should just brace up. 2024 is not going to be a very easy year. It's going to be, we would wait to see how a lot of these policies conceptualized by government to improve the lives of people, to make it easier to do business, come together. But 2024 definitely is going to really be a test, for Nigerians. So we should brace up.
Okay. Professor Adamu, and you?
Yeah, it must be cut in spending and prioritization and investments. So people should diversify their sources of income, especially production. So instead of buying and selling business, we should focus more on doing business production. That will help the economy, because the only solution to Nigeria's economic problems, is production. Everyone should produce, because the easiest way to become rich is to produce. So for Nigerians, cut in spending, prioritize your spending, and then diversify your income through production. And that's why the government has to come in to enable the environment for people to do that. It's not given to say government will provide cash incentives or temporary compensation for the removal of subsidy. So when you give people money directly, they will use it to consume things that are already inflated. So it makes no difference in their economy. But when you enable the environment for people to thrive, to produce more, so you are making people to become economically independent by themselves, and then they can generate more money. So spending money that will be for temporary benefit will not augur well. So the government should focus on using those savings for any investment that will enable productions and businesses by people. So that's the whole purpose of the government, people to invest and the government to enable. But government should not be giving money directly to people, but that will not lead to economic prosperity, because people will keep waiting for more and more from the government, and the government don't have the money to do that. And eventually the government has to borrow money at the expensive price to continue to give it to people, and that will not result to a better economic outlook.
Thank you very much, Professor Adamu and Enebong. I'll end with the words of a modern famous philosopher called Jay-Z. He's actually a rapper. He says, until you own your own, you can't be rich, which means
Yes.
we need to produce. And I think that sums it up. Thank you so much, Professor Adamu and Enebong. Always a pleasure having these conversations with you. I think it's a good way for us to start the year. And quarter by March, we'll follow up and see where we are and let the people know. So thank you always for being our economic art analyst on this show. We really do appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.